And so I'm going to speak a little bit about advocacy today. And I'm going to start with asking you, what does the word advocacy mean to you? What words or actions maybe come to mind? Anybody got any suggestions? What do you think about when you hear advocacy?
Coaching.
Yeah?
Speaking out.
Yeah?
Campaigning.
Yeah? Any more? There's lots, if you Google advocacy, you could come up with like protesting, boycotting, championing, campaigning, recommending. But often advocacy and activism are used quite interchangeably. But they're quite different things, but together they're really important. So advocacy means like public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy, so kind of sharing. Whereas activism is a bit more active. It's about kind of being on the front line of a strike or a protest, for example. And I really like the way that Eva Lewis put it. She's a teenage activist in advocacy, and she said, to be an activist is to speak, and to be an advocate is to listen. But we really need both, so society can't move forward without both of them, so they work really well together. For me personally, advocacy is about dialogue, and it's about listening, learning, talking and discussing. So even last night I got into a conversation with someone who politically was completely on the other side of the spectrum, and so many times I've been in that situation where the conversation just stops because they're not willing to engage. But I'm so glad, and the person in the audience know who he is, that we continued that discussion and we were able to kind of push through that and see what was similar and what was the same between the both of us. To me, the most successful and sustainable type of change occurs when you bring different opinions and viewpoints into the room or into the discussion, which is happening here today. When you look at the big picture, advocacy is about people in all our diversity. But in a time of Twitter spats and trade wars, of increasing, not decreasing tolerance, how do we respectfully advocate for change? How do we amplify the voices of the people that are calling for change? So connecting people is so important, and I think Jane is one of the most amazing connectors of people I have come across. And for me in my career this far, bringing people together into a room is the most amazing way of getting people to listen, to learn, and to change maybe the opinion that they had based on maybe inaccurate facts or just a stereotype that they had. And that is a really great way of getting people to be involved as well, to come and be part of what you're trying to do. So we've got two photos I'd like to show you. So you've probably heard that I like fair trade. I'm a passionate supporter of fair trade. I'm known as fair trade Ffion at home. Can't really get rid of it, so it's with me forever, I think. But earlier this year, I was able to secure a grant from the Welsh Government for our County Federation of Young Farmers to bring a fair trade coffee farmer from Uganda to rural Wales. It's a conservative, not very diverse area of Wales. There's a palpable level of racism, and there's a widely stereotypical view of Uganda, of Africa, and generally of people who are not from round here. I'm not sure how many of you in rural areas have kind of heard that term being said before. I really wanted to bring Nimrod to rural Wales to visit farmers of all ages and the wider rural community, to get an opportunity to learn directly from him, to hear from him about his life as a coffee farmer and about his life in rural Uganda, so that they could learn from one another, compare notes, so to speak. So the reason I put this photo up, because I think you can see in the faces of the children that just absorbing everything he has to say. They were just like wide-eyed, and the questions they asked for young kids was just incredible. So that impact of being together, but not just with students. We met with hundreds of students, farmers, businesses, politicians in that week. And that face-to-face contact was really incredible. I just want to read out a quote that I've translated from one of the secondary school students that met him. He said, "I've been blown away by the amount of work that goes into producing coffee. There are lots of steps and work, and it's just picking the fruit, and it's all done by hand with no machines. I had no idea. And it's a waste not to buy fair trade coffee because a lot of work goes into producing that coffee." And then I want to show kind of the other side. Sorry, this is a little bit dark, this photo I've taken. So I was out in Kenya just 2 weeks ago. I'm working for a youth organisation in Brussels at the moment, and we had a global conference in Nairobi. Ooh, did I do that? Sorry. Thank you. So it was a huge global conference, and we knew that there were members of the European Parliament visiting the conference. And we thought, what better to get them to understand what we're trying to do than for them to meet the young people directly and to hear from them directly. So these are 3 members of the European Parliament from all across Europe, and you can see again in their faces that they're totally listening to what the young woman has to say. They're engaged, they're listening, and they're really going to take that on board. So it's really impactful when you can bring people together, but I guess some of you are thinking, well, yeah, great, but it's not always that easy to bring people together in the room, especially if you're working on international project. But thanks to technology, there are ways of replicating that kind of face-to-face meeting. So, for example, FaceTime a Farmer is a really hugely successful initiative that's growing, that's using technology to kind of bridge that gap of bringing farmers into classrooms. Social media, to be used with caution, and I'll come back to that in a second, but Facebook Lives, for example, you can have arranged Twitter chats with one hashtag for 1 hour every day of 1 week where you all come together to talk about something. But these are all different tools in your toolbox, but the most important thing is to plan. What's that phrase? Fail to plan, plan to fail, something like that. So this next slide, it looks a bit chaotic. You might not be able to see all of it, but it's about power dynamics. It's about understanding, okay, who's part of this situation. For example, say I want to call for more bus routes in my community. I really need to figure out, okay, who's with me, who's against me. What power do they have? For example, okay, great, I have a politician who's on side. So they'd come up a bit higher because they have more power of influence and they're really with me. But then maybe who's on the opposite side? Maybe there's another local group that don't want to see more buses running through the town. They don't want to have more transport coming through. So it's about understanding who's where. And that comes to deciding how you're going to communicate with them, how you're going to get them on board, or how you're going to get them to shift their opinion and be part of your movement. So online and offline, I think, is a really important discussion to have, because I think technology is amazing and social media and online media is really powerful. But I think it's really important also not to think about offline as well. So I'll just run through a couple of ideas, for example. Let's think about your MP, your MEP, those that you have elected to be in office. They're there to represent you and they have a duty to listen. So never fear emailing your MP. Just don't worry about it at all. Like your councillor, your MEPs, email them. If they don't answer, call. They get so many emails, they miss a lot of them. Don't be fearful of just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I called, I sent this message, can you come to this meeting that we're having about wanting to have more buses? I'll take that example again. Can you come and listen? And politicians like being seen. So if they come, tell them, oh, you can speak. They love that. Kind of strokes their egos, which a lot of them have. Like, you can do the opening remarks. They'll tweet about it probably. They'll probably put it in the press for you because they have good contacts with the press. So it's using people like that for them to spread the message further. And then you can look on the other side of things. Maybe you want to engage an older demographic of people in your community because they think that they have a lot of influence as well over decisions that are made in the council, for example. So are you going to go to Twitter? How many of them are going to be on Twitter? Facebook might be a better idea. They might not be online at all and really trust and read the local press. And they're often looking for stories. They're really happy to print things. And even if you come down from town level, I don't know if you have in Scotland, we have very tiny kind of local papers. And sometimes they'll give you a 2-page spread. You can really go to town and really explaining what you want to do and get that message across. So it's always good to have an idea of who's involved in this situation that you want to advocate to change and how you can get them on board and influence them. I've got a video up next. I think it's going to work. So I have a bit of a script to go with this. So bear with me, I was really never destined for the auction ring or to be a sport commentator. So I'm going to have to talk a bit fast in some of it. But, Oh no, social media first. I'll come back to that. Do I click and it plays? Or? Perfect. So you might be wondering why I'm showing you a video of a festival with a semi-naked guy dancing without a care. But there's a message, okay? This video is often used to talk about leadership, but it's really applicable to advocacy and trying to create change. So here we go. So, yeah. So we've talked a bit about how it takes real courage to be the front person, to want to create change. So, like this guy dancing alone, he looks a little bit ridiculous, but he's got the first follower here. So they're both dancing. Now there's two, there's a mass. There's also a crucial lesson in what he's doing. It's easy to follow, it's instructional. Do this, shake your arms. So make your advocacy work easy for other people. Consider the first dancer, the flint. The second dancer is the spark that makes the fire. So they're going for it. You can hear, if you hear the audio, you can hear messages. People are ridiculing you. Like, I got people telling me, like, why are you bringing this coffee farmer over? What's the point? But then you get someone else coming along, the third dancer, to join the dance. So your advocacy is the turning point, okay? It's not just 3 wild dancers now. 3 is a crowd, and crowd is news. Make your movement public. Make sure that you're visible. If you're in the local paper, on social media, make sure everyone that's involved, not just make it about everyone that's involved, just not about the leader. So see, people tend to follow followers, not the person that's initiated. Now here we go, we've got 3, 4, 5 more. You've really got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now you've got a movement. So more people jump in. It's no longer risky. They were on the fence before. There's no reason not to join now. Actually, they might be ridiculed and stand out for not being part of the in crowd. So over the next minute, we'll see more and more people be part of the crowd. And eventually, there you go. That is how a movement is made. So it's a really great video. We can stop it there. So I think that's a really good way of kind of showing how change can happen. So recap a little bit about what was going on there. So be public, be easy to follow, make it easy for people to come on board. You can make it really easy, like just come along for this one meeting, take it in steps. Make it about everyone. I think advocacy is not about one person, which activism sometimes can be. For example, maybe we're seeing Greta Thunberg at the front of the climate change. There's so many millions of others advocating on climate change across the world. Some things to think about when you're doing some advocacy work. So have a plan, always have a plan. And so then you can see how you're progressing, where you're headed, and how you're getting to a goal. And then you can look at what's been working, what's not, and change course to head in the right direction. Be respectful, particularly if you are going to engage on social media. So that's why I put this GIF, because social media is just so full of lots of news. And so breaking through that and the kind of polarized opinions on there can be really difficult sometimes to deal with. So be respectful. I'd recommend not getting into a Twitter spat. It really doesn't work that well. It doesn't get you very far. I think you can enter into a respectful dialogue, and then if it's not working, just say, really sorry, I'm not finding this helpful. I'm just going to step away. And just step away from that, because it can be really toxic. But another one on that list, when I go back to it, is about being authentic. Be yourself. How do you get people to listen when there's so much going on around us? But people really identify with personal stories. I think we all kind of, when Russ was really willing to be open and personal this morning, I think we all kind of identified with that a bit more than if he hadn't have been so willing to be so personal. So thank you for doing that. So going back there. So listening is as important as talking, whether that's in a meeting or on social media. If you're just kind of banging out loads of messages on your Twitter, but not retweeting others or commenting or getting into dialogue, you're just kind of shouting, and no one can really hear or listen or talk to you like that. Think online and offline. So many amazing things you can do in papers. Even if you want to host an event, like local businesses are always really amazing and super supportive. Always let you put a poster up in the window, or if you want to share something on their Facebook pages, they're really, really great. And the last thing is be creative, have fun. Art and the creative world has so much power in advocacy, and I'm really glad I followed an artist because I think art is so undervalued in advocacy. I was in a conference a couple of weeks ago, 10,000 delegates, amazing speakers from across the world, panels, but the one thing that really stayed with me and really made me think about the issue was this 10-minute film I saw that was made in someone's kitchen, and it was so impactful, and so I think don't forget the power of art. My final comment is be kind to yourself. Change takes time to happen. I think it's like waves, you know, kind of sometimes you have a really quick time of really rapid change, and then maybe you get a knockback, but then you go again. So keep ploughing on. Be respectful, creative, have a plan, make it a team effort, and just be realistic about how quickly change can happen, but don't be scared of taking that first step. Thanks.